Okay, welcome to a special edition of Between the Pages Book Chat, where we'll be talking with author Angela sorry, Smith, about the anthology Giving the Devil His Due, which is part of Read for Pixels and the Pixel Project, and we'll be talking all about that as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to her, and she'll probably pronounce her name quite better than I just did. So introduce yourself and tell us all about you.
Hi, well, my name is Angela Yuriko Smith, and you actually pronounced it fine. Like I didn't actually, I heard nothing wrong with that. So, gold star. But yep, I'm here. I've got a story in Giving the Devil His Due, which is from the Pixel Project. This is their first anthology, so it's kind of a real thrill to be involved with it. And the money goes to stopping violence against women, which is pretty good cause, I think. And ordinarily, I do a lot of writing. Wow, I always stumble at this part of the thing. I do writing. I'm a writer. Oh, and a publisher of Space and Time magazine.
Yes, that's quite important, I
Yeah,
think, considering.
yeah. Oh, and I should say 3-time Bram Stoker this year nominee. So that's kind of cool with something that came out. So that pretty much sums it up.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little quick view of the covers here, so everyone can take a good look at them. And there they are, coming on May 25th in 2022. They're available for pre-order now from Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Book Depository, and all the other good retailers. So it's for a worthy cause. So, and there are some excellent authors, including Angela, as well as Lee Murray and Kelly Armstrong. So go check it out.
Yeah, and I'll add the yellow cover. This is a limited edition, and that actually won't be available much longer. That's going to change over, I think, in May to the white cover.
Okay, so yeah, because yeah, the orange was kind of nice.
I know, I do like it.
Anyway, so I'm going to ask a little bit about tell us your involvement with the anthology and the Pixel Project. How did you get involved in it?
It was actually by accident. I'm good friends with Lee Murray, and I think somebody had to pull out of the Pixel Project at the last minute. And so I was asked if I could come up with a story basically in 2 days. And it was kind of like, oh, I know you can't, but if you could, that'd be great. And so I did happen to have a story that was in the process of being finished. So I just finished it up real quick, and that's Just Us League. Sent it in. Um, I've had domestic abuse in my past and issues like that. So it was kind of I really wanted to be involved with this and contribute a story if I could on a personal level. And so the story that I actually contributed has to do with one of those situations with a boss that I had, not in the Glad shop, but his name was Manager Matt. And then, so therefore, just kind of went from there, gotten really involved with the Pixel Project since then, trying to do different things to help promote them. Because, like you said, it's a really great cause. You know, who wants violence against women? You know, if we can stop that. Oh, and we're just National Women's Day. Didn't that just happen like yesterday?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
So
it will be a little more than yesterday when this airs. Yes, International Women's Day did happen recently.
yeah, well, we could just say today. Oh, today is National Women's Day because but
Yeah,
so
don't worry, I do that. I do that all the time too. I'm on the recorded stuff.
yeah, so no, it's a really good project. I'm super proud to be involved, and Regina Yao and her team work so hard to try to keep this going and to do so many good things. I mean, beyond just like writing the stories, they actually are on the ground sharing links and resources and things like that. So it's very real help.
Yeah. Yeah, I checked out the website. It seems like a very good organization and well worth the time and the support. So, tell us about the theme of the anthology. Did they give you guidelines, or was it just sort of there's a general theme and run with it?
There was a general theme. There's a thing that they always say, and I do not watch TV, so I always forget what it is. But it's like promising young woman meets something. But it was basically just a victim getting justice. You know, somebody who's been victimized getting justice in this story, and that was the whole theme. So that's a fun theme. I think that's a theme that we explore in horror, anyways, a lot. So it's
Yeah.
pretty easy for me to come
Yeah.
up with that.
My characters do that a lot. Generally, it's less justice and more bloody revenge, but
Yeah. Wait, those aren't the same thing?
they are in horror.
That's funny.
Yeah, because I did very much the same thing in several of my stories for Visions and Nightmares. So yeah.
Hmm. I think it's a lot of women are attracted to writing horror because of that, because we can flip that dynamic quite easily. Little kids wind up being the scary element, and the dogs and things like that can, like, typically the underdogs can wind up being
The heroes or the villains, depending on
yeah.
where
Yeah, I
you
was
go.
thinking some of my scenes, I was like, well, maybe not hero isn't the right word, but satisfying.
Anti-hero, maybe.
Anti-hero is a good way to put it.
Yeah, a lot of my children end up being villains. I don't know where that comes from. I'm just
I
saying.
know.
I like children. I do not have anything against children.
My husband has accused me of having little girls that carry knives and stab people all the time. He's like, in all your stories, there's a little girl with a knife stabbing people. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's like yeah, I've noticed that too. I've rebranded myself as I write all things dark and stabby. So
Love that. uh,
okay, so tell us a little bit about the story. What can we expect?
the story, when I wrote this, I actually wanted to not go with a typical female protagonist, beautiful, or anything like that. She's not particularly clever. She's actually a janitor, and she's middle aged, and her name is Gertie. And I apologize for anybody who's named Gertie, but I was really just trying to think of just a plain working woman kind of name. So I came up with Gertie, and an older name. Gertrude is kind of an older name, but that's kind of who she is. She keeps her head down. She doesn't like trouble. She doesn't feel very empowered. And then this mysterious card comes into her life, the Justice League card, and it promises that if she writes the name of somebody who's done her wrong on this card, then it will be taken care of. And that's the part that's kind of the magic, or we don't really know who the Justice League is. So that's kind of where she comes at it. And in the process of that, she does become empowered, and then she's able to pass that on to somebody else, and hopefully spread that empowerment from that underdog perspective.
Okay, so there are the magic card box, get your wish sort of trope that you're playing with here is pretty well known. So I'm going to ask: are there consequences to her using the card in the story?
There is, but only in her own mind. Because then she starts crossing the line between being the victim and then becoming the villain. Because if you have all power, where do you stop using that? When does it become like, this person actually did me wrong, and now I just don't like that person? So, and that's where she realizes she's crossing that line, and so she passes it on. Thank you, Bree.
Okay, so what originally inspired the idea of the story?
It was actually a real job. I guess I probably shouldn't say where I actually worked, but I was a janitor, much like Gertie. And the boss that I had, whose name was Manager Matt, I did not change that part. That's pretty common. He was like the biggest jerk. He made me cry so many times, and I'm not a crier, but he would just insult you on such a base level. I mean, he would make fun of my clothes. He'd say, "Where do you shop? Goodwill?" Well, actually, yes, because I was a janitor. I really didn't have a lot of money. And I'm sorry, I still shop at Goodwill because there's great deals, and I like used clothes, and it's more environmental. But, and just the constant picking and picking, and he'd have a bad day, so then he'd blame you for something. And I already had so many stresses, I was going through a divorce, which was the result of a domestic abuse situation, and just everything together, and which is probably why I was so sensitive to him. But it wound up coming down to, like, everybody really detested him and hated him, and the jokes were getting more and more serious. until the point where everybody was standing there one time talking about having a blanket party. Like when he came out in the parking lot, somebody threw a blanket over him. Everybody beat him up. Ha ha ha, we're joking, but we're all really kind of serious. And at that point, I realized, wow, this is like, I really don't want to actually hurt somebody, but I'm having this incredible anger. And I think that it was like the next day, I was trying to leave. I clocked out. My shift was over. You cannot stay past your shift. This was a corporate situation, so you'd get in trouble. And he blocked me on these stairs that were incredibly steep. And he was below me, and I was above him. And he told me I couldn't leave. And I was saying, like, well, I have to leave because I'm off the clock and it's time for me to go home. Why are you telling me I need to stay? And he says, because I'm just telling you, I'm your boss. And my hands actually twitched to push him down the stairs. And I thank goodness I stopped, because I would be telling you the story from jail right now, probably. But that's when I wrote the story originally, when I wrote the bare bones of it, because I realized, wow, I really have to get that anger out, because something will happen like that. When I originally wrote the story, I used a male protagonist, because I just felt I needed I didn't want it to be me in the story. I needed some kind of filter or some kind of barrier. So it was a male protagonist, and he was actually less of a victim and just more of a jerk kind of thing. But it was the same premise of the card. He finds it in the locker and, writes the name on it and stuff like that. But when I rewrote it or reworked it as the woman protagonist, it wound up just being really cathartic. And I didn't realize I still had so many anger issues with him, so that was good. That was good. He died again. So
yeah, you can't go to jail for this death. So.
Yeah, it was in fiction. It is in this story. Never happened for real. My fingerprints are not there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. And if he sees this video, he'll know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were a jerk, and you've been immortalized. What's that? Was it Chaucer, or that eviscerated in fiction? He has been eviscerated in fiction.
Okay, so you mentioned you yourself suffered domestic abuse. So is that why the cause is important to you?
It is, and not only just seeing it as well, like knowing other people, and not really feeling like I could say anything, or because I was kind of in the point of, well, I don't want to look at that, because then it mirrors, if I can't tell you what to do, because then I have to look at what I should be doing as well. And so I would kind of avoid the whole situation, but I felt like I saw so many situations of victimization with kids and other women. So when I finally got out of my situation, which I didn't realize it was it wound up being a prison thing. Like, my ex wound up being convicted and everything. And I had no concept. I would have never called myself a domestic abuse victim until I talked to the social workers and stuff. And it was just like a lot of that counseling and that, because there was no actual hitting violence involved. There was other things, so it was just like that subtlety and everything. There was so many things wrapped up into it. That's why I'm so involved with it now. It almost took my life. Because that was the breaking point, was a violent situation. And that next morning, the only thing that saved me was knowing that I had kids, and they were all older at that point, but they would still be there, with that kind of unresolved, who's looking out for them then, kind of thing. So yeah, if this work, like this, what we're doing, you doing this interview, if that voice can get out there and help anybody else to maybe be able to see their situation a little better, or remind us, everybody, whatever sex you are, that it's just not right, showing that other perspective. I think that's absolutely amazing if we can do that.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people don't understand about domestic abuse, is that when you're inside it, you don't really see it well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because there's a lot of gaslighting going on.
Mm-hmm.
between the abuser and the abused. And that's what I think needs to have more people educated on, is that it's that a lot of women just can't get out because they don't know that they need to. in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's that denial. It's no, everything is fine, and that's what our culture tells us. Everything is always fine. That's actually how I met my husband now, because I couldn't talk to anybody, because I didn't want to admit to anybody that I knew that everything was not fine, like after I had left. And so he was in Australia. I'd never meet him, so I could be honest with him about what was going on. Then go figure, we've been married 11 years now. But flash forward. But yeah, that gaslighting thing, and the children and the animals, if you don't have the money to get out, what are you going to do? Just go live on the street? You know what I mean? So it's easy to just kind of go, no, he didn't mean it. It's okay. That's not really happening like that. I'm a wife. I'm supposed to be submissive. All of these things. Sometimes religion kind of comes into it and helps that narrative,
Yeah, there's a widespread societal brainwashing in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then just little things like this, hopefully, can just chisel those little cracks into it so that we can break it apart and evolve past it and truly be egalitarian and different, but cooperative. We benefit each other, the different sexes. We don't need to have one oppressed. I mean, we all know women are the best, smarter.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the main character, about her background and how she gets herself into this situation.
You don't really know specifically from the story where Gertie comes from or anything. You just kind of come into her life on this day when she's a downtrodden janitor and finds this card. But there's like little hints that a lot of this came from her past. She grew up like this, so it's kind of a natural state for her to be downtrodden. And she's just somebody who's just never had much in her life, which is so many of us, really so many of us. And that's one thing when I was a janitor, and her story mirrors my emotional states a lot. Of course, the writer puts himself in the story. But that sense of every day is the same. There is no hope. You exist to eat dinner, shower, get up the next day and do the same thing. There's no challenges. There's no, it's the grind of existence. And that's kind of what Gertie is in the beginning of the story. And she gets a little reprieve, but it's not anything that's going to change her life. And, now she's a princess. But at the end of it, she can give that help to somebody else who may or may not take it. That's that person's choice. But in doing so, I was trying to communicate that her life is now different because she's learned to give to somebody else. Like, she's extended hope, and that gives her purpose. So she's no longer going to be in that grind. And there's a little bit of a metaphor in the last line. She gives the card to somebody else and turns the corner, and that was me, like literally meaning she turns the corner in her life and she's now a different person. Still all the same problems, still, has to work through that stuff, but she's on a different path.
Okay. So what fears and motivations drive your characters, both the protagonist and the antagonist?
I guess the fears that drive Gertie would just be survival. She sees a situation that kind of breaks her heart with the younger girl and, manager Matt, the protagonist, or the evil guy. But she doesn't, and I guess that's me mirroring that, I've seen this and I felt like I couldn't do anything at the time. And so it affects her emotionally, but she really just can't make waves. She'll lose her job. Who's going to pay the rent? Who's going to take care of her? Nobody. She has to do this herself. So I would think that's her fear, is making any kind of waves and becoming a bigger victim than she already is. And she probably doesn't really see herself as a victim. She's just kind of in this morose existence, this gray existence that just continues, not necessarily a victim, just life sucks kind of mentality. And Matt, I don't know if he has any fears, because he's just kind of self-involved, and the world is just his thing to use. He grew up spoiled. His father, who was a nice guy, owned the shop, but was a little too indulgent with him. And Matt has just kind of, as a kid, been able to just run everything and do what he wants, eat whatever he wants. So when his father passes the shop to him, because he gets older, he can just continue to run that. So I don't think he ever really gets like that moment of self-realization of like, oh, I should have been a different person. You don't actually see his death, you just see the aftermath of it. But I think that happens a lot. Like we would like to be able to talk to somebody and say, hey, do you see where you were wrong? And now can you maybe say sorry, and I can have closure? And sometimes there just isn't closure. Sometimes you have to close it yourself. And that's kind of what Matt is. And there's another manager that has an issue like that, a run-in with the Just Us League. And then a third manager who was not, he obviously, even though he was part of that group, I guess, he was not trying to be. Like, he was trying to do what he could on the side, so he didn't really suffer the same fate, which is, hopefully I'm not really like, I'm a terrible spoiler person because I love spoilers. Always tell me the ending. I don't care. And then I'll just read it and enjoy it anyways. But yeah, so the third guy, because of that, that's kind of Gertie's change of heart, where she realizes she's going after him, but is he the problem? Like, does he deserve that same fate? Has he been, people can change sometimes. So she gives him that.
And there's always that, is he kind of caught in the same situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, it's not always just her. She's not just the victim. He was also part of that victimization.
Okay, so were there any scenes in the story that were difficult to write?
Yeah, the scene where she finds the card, for some reason, I really struggled with. I think there was so much reality in that scene, even though nothing really happens in it. It was a situation where the manager comes in and he's kind of bullying her, and she'd found the card and she leaves. That's pretty much the scene. But I really struggled with it because I was so caught up in the textures and because every time I would try to write it, I was actually there. And then all of that emotion and irritation and downtrodden, life just sucks kind of emotion would all kind of come back to me for that scene. So
you had trouble channeling it.
Yeah, it was too much.
Okay, so do you have a favorite scene in the story?
Yeah, that's definitely the last scene for me, which was completely not in the first one. Most of it's like completely rewritten, except for the shop is the same, and there was a manager, Matt. He had to stay the same. And that last scene wasn't where I thought I was going with it. I had a completely different little outline going, and then you know how it is. Sometimes the characters are just like, "Oh no, that's not what we're doing. We're going over here," and so that's what happened. Gertie just kind of did her own thing, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just keep going and we'll see what happens. And then when that little metaphor came in about her turning the corner and she's giving it to somebody else and, the hope. Yeah, that was absolutely my favorite scene.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a good scene. Yeah, and I do know how the characters take over. Yeah.
It's so annoying sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to save a character in a story I recently wrote. No, the character decided, nope, I'm not being saved.
I've had that, like, what? You can't die now? I had like 3 chapters with you in it.
Yeah, well, this was a short story, so I didn't have. Once she died, she was dead. So
yeah,
but it made a better story. So
yeah. Oh my goodness, and I apologize about my enthusiastic dog.
Oh, don't worry about the dog. Yeah, it's not a interview or a video. If the dog hasn't barked, the cat hasn't made an appearance, or the child has waved. So okay, so to wrap it up, let's tell the audience a little bit about you as a writer. What kind of books have you written, and what can we find?
Wow, my son is coming in and out for some reason. I apologize. Mostly horror. I started out in newspaper work for years. I did mostly nonfiction, and started doing fiction in 2011 with End of May, which you were my first blurber and my first author friend way back I think that was 2011, wasn't it? Or
Something like
2010?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was ages ago. So Anita and I love this woman. We go way back. Yeah, my first
Yeah.
blurber and
Yeah.
my first author
You were
friend.
the first, one of the first authors that, supported me too. So
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and look where we are now. So cool. So, but yeah, way back on Gather. But yeah, I know you didn't mean go far that far back, but I just want to bring that up. Anita's pretty cool. But yeah, started out there. That was my first fiction, and just kind of fell in love with it after that. Wrote Bittersweets was kind of like my breakout story, and that was based on advice that somebody gave me to stop writing stop writing the things that I was reading and that I thought horror should be, and write myself into it. And so that's where I love gadgets and anything that glows and anything technological. And even though I'm not real, I do a lot of science fiction writing now, but it used to just be straight horror. So I started putting that in it. And yeah, that wound up being a really, really good advice. So I have to credit Brian Theowara with that advice. But yeah, Bittersweets wound up being kind of my breakthrough book, novella with a Bram Stoker finalist. And then I went poetry. I just do a mix of stuff. Right now, I'm on a nonfiction kick. So as soon as I finish up with this last little bit of fiction, we've got a couple of nonfiction books coming up. And lately, since Tortured Willows, which is the poetry book that I did with Christina Singh and Genevieve Flynn and Lee Murray, that was all about our Asian perspective. And that kind of got me deep diving into my Uchinanchu roots and just blew the lid off of everything, pivoted my life around. So now I'm on a completely different track from where I thought I was going. And I'm doing a lot of work with that. So right now I'm putting together a nonfiction book on shamanism in the Western world. And basically the premise is what happens like in all, I don't want to say all, most other cultures, when a teenager hears voices or kind of starts going through that, thinning of the veil, seeing two worlds. That's the way it's viewed in a lot of the other cultures. And so somebody in the village or community will take him and under their wing, give him coping skills, or her. I don't mean it to be a gendered thing. Give them these skills and they become an asset to their community. But in the Western world, we put that person on medication or put them in a homeless shelter or we institutionalize them. So that's kind of the premise of this nonfiction is what happens to a society if it takes its shamans and it, has no spirituality. Like we tend to have that whole Sunday morning, I've got the Bible saying on my wall and I go to church on Sunday morning. So now I can be an evil person the rest of the week. Not to get too opinionated.
That's called hypocrisy, by the way. That's not Christianity or religion or spirituality. Exactly. That's hypocrisy.
Yeah. But that's like in our Western culture, we can slip into that so easily and lose that authenticity, like the authenticity of a real spirituality. So, so that's why I always want to preface, I'm not trying to diss any religion or anything, but that, that Pharisee kind of mentality.
Yeah, to me, that's not religion.
Exactly. But we tend to, not you and I, or, any specific group, but it tends to be accepted as like, oh, you went to church? Well, you've got the carte blanche to do whatever you want. So.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. That's another unfortunate social thing that has to change.
Exactly. Yeah. So we definitely have room to grow. That's good.
Okay. So do you have anything upcoming besides the anthology?
I do. I've got a couple stories coming out from Crystal Lake this next year. I've got an essay about cemeteries, performing a marriage in a cemetery, coming out from an anthology from Lauren Rhodes, an essay collection, I guess. It's not really an anthology. I've got a book that's a tribute to Anne Rice. That is an anthology of short stories put together by Rebecca Rowland and Emily Pascal, and that's coming out for Mother's Day in this May, and that's called Dancing with the Shadows, a tribute to Anne Rice. And I'm reading all this because I don't remember this. I have Unquiet Spirits, which is an essay collection I'm doing with Lee Murray, and it's the Asian perspectives in nonfiction this time, kind of like a follow-up to Black Cranes and Tortured Willows. and that's coming out from Black Spot Books next Valentine's Day. And then I have a book coming out called Building Story on March 26th. It's on pre-order now. And that's just things that the most useful things that I have found in my career over the last 10 years of doing fiction only. And then I just kind of put it all in a book, including like that advice that Brian Theo Ward gave me of, writing from putting yourself in the writing, which seems like kind of a no-brainer, but it's amazing how much we don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. And there will be links in the description for her website and Amazon and all the lovely things that you can find books. And I definitely recommend checking her books out, especially Black Cranes and Tortured Willows. Excellent books. Bram Stoker nominee, named all the good stuff. So
yeah, just ... Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'd like to thank you for being here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Always. Yeah. I continue to be your fan.
And don't forget the giving the devil his due is out on pre-order now, and it will be released on May 25th, 2022. So check it out.
Yep. And this is the last little bit of time to get the special yellow cover.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, thank you. And that's all for now on this special edition of Between the Pages Book Chat. So bye-bye.